full partner and co-leader of communication and dissemination work activity under the project. TSO2020 project is the largest action approved in the first announced synergy call of proposal launched as part of the EU Connecting Europe Facility funding program, and project aims to demonstrate the technical and commercial viability of power to hydrogen solutions and alternative transport infrastructure needs. It identifies also new market opportunities and offers a valuable support for the energy transition. Given high relevance of project outcomes in line with the objectives that we set, we wanted to hold policy roundtable by involving key industry players, European Association representatives and policymakers to discuss the role of hydrogen and synergies. The event was originally planned, as most of you know, to take place on 25th of March this year, but due to COVID-19 context, we couldn't make it. Recent green recovery announcements, national energy strategies, and the European Green Deal have all brought hydrogen back into focus as a key enabler in the race for carbon neutrality. So this renewed relevance gave us additional motivation. And as someone once said, the show must go on. We managed to organize this virtual roundtable, and in this way, to have you all here with, I think, very diverse audience. Therefore, we appreciate all your efforts to be together virtually. Coming to the agenda, today the agenda will be structured in the following way. First of all, the event will be chaired by Sonja van Rensen, who is the managing editor of Energy Monitor, a website that tells data-driven stories about global energy transition. Based in Brussels, Sonja is an experienced journalist and conference moderator who has previously written for leading energy and climate titles, including S&P Global Platts and Nature Climate Change. She won a BBC-sponsored Young Broadcaster of the Year award in 2005. In the coming minutes, the opening speech will be delivered by Dirk Schaap, coordinator in hydrogen transport from Dutch Ministry of Water and Infrastructure. And there is, of course, there is slight change. So Dirk is replacing Mariette van Empel in the last minute. I wanted also to mention that Ministry of Water and Infrastructure is also an important partner and co-founding authority under the project. Next, we will have great pleasure to have Jutta Paulus, member of the European Parliament from Greens, to give a keynote speech. Then our project coordinator, Remco Wassink, will open all our cards and by giving you a clear picture of the project outcomes that I've mentioned. And then 5 speakers will deliver presentations on the topic hydrogen and synergies. And this panel includes from policy pillar.
Hello.
Amy, you are muted.
Eamon, you've muted yourself by accident. You need to unmute yourself.
I don't know what happened.
There you go. You're back.
Yes?
You're back. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Then from academia, we will have Professor Mart van der Meyden from TU Delft. So the university is the full partner under the project. Professor Mart also represents TenneT, which is a major stakeholder in the project. From industry side, we will have Rene Schutte, program manager hydrogen from Hazuni. Another last speaker will be from public-private partnership, Nikolaos Limperopoulos, project manager at Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. Following the panel, participants will have 10 minutes to get answers from all speakers. After a short coffee break, we will move on debates in which we expect collecting inputs from all participants through exchanges that can help shape, of course, policy recommendations for large-scale deployment of hydrogen technologies across the EU. Outcomes from debate sessions, concluding remarks will be provided by Sonja van Rensen at the end. So as you know, it's an online event and we have got few rules to make the presentation of all smoother. So please turn on your camera, but keep your microphone off. when you are not speaking, and ask your questions to speakers in the chat. Write privately to the host on the chat if you have any technical issues. Please note that the event is recorded, and we wish everyone a successful, safe, and fruitful event. Now I would like to give the floor to the Master of Ceremony, Sonia van Riesen. So Sonia, please.
Thank you very much, Emin, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you virtually this morning for what I hope will be an interesting series of presentations and discussion. So as Emin said, I'm the managing editor for Energy Monitor, a new website dedicated to the energy transition globally, launched just this September by the New Statesman Group. So do go have a look later on today if you have a moment. I think my role today is to try and, despite the virtuality, can you say that, virtualness of our event, to try and make it as interactive as possible. So I would encourage you to please do send in questions via the chat. We have a Q&A and a debate towards the end. If there are questions that come in while speakers are speaking, I will be keeping an eye on the chat, so we can try and squeeze them in here and there if we look like we're more or less on time. And on the timing notes, I would ask our speakers once again to try and please do stick to time as much as you can, so that we make sure we get through everything and everyone has a chance to have their say. So with that, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker. As Emin said, Mariette van Empel cannot be with us at the last moment, unfortunately. She's tied up in the Netherlands. There are budget talks, I understand, and you can imagine that's not easy to extricate yourself from. We have, however, a very able replacement, her colleague Dirk Schaap, who's coordinator for hydrogen in transport at the Dutch Ministry for Infrastructure and Water Management. So Dirk, over to you. And you're still mute. You'll need to unmute yourself. I can't do that. Yeah, there you go.
I thought I was unmuted, but okay. Good morning, everyone. This is a very exciting moment for me, and apologies for having me and not Mariette van Empel, my director. She was called to the minister in the processes of discussions in Parliament about the budgets for next year, which you can imagine is too important not to do. Well, it's not an option not to go there. So you have to do it with me. For me, it's a very exciting moment because I believe around 2015, discussions at the Commission started about, or rumors started about a synergy call being prepared. And at the time in the Netherlands at the ministry, we had the feeling that if we wanted hydrogen in transport and mobility to be a serious option, we needed the other side of the value chain, the production of hydrogen and other sectors and applications, to make it a viable and, well, in due time, competitive option. So I've been connected to the synergy calls as of 2015, and I'm very proud to be here at this meeting, presenting and discussing the results of the project in one of the, well, later phases. I believe TSO2020 was the first EU-funded integrated hydrogen project that the Netherlands embarked on. With this type of projects, the European Commission was looking for synergies between the energy system, the transport system, and their interactions, and prepared a synergy call. It was at the time, it is our strong belief that one system, the transport system, cannot do without the other one. If we want zero emission mobility, then we need electrification and hydrogen in our energy systems. And then we need production and transport of hydrogen at scale to make it a competitive green option. TSO2020 is an exemplary project where these two transitions, the energy transition and the transition to smart and sustainable mobility, have come together for the first time in a European context. In order for transport and mobility to make headway in the transition towards zero emission mobility, we need more renewable energy carriers that allow us to proceed on the long-term pathway towards decarbonizing the transport sector. A shift towards electromobility is key, and both batteries and fuel cells are needed to allow the transport sector to decarbonize as a whole, from passenger vehicles to heavy duty, maritime, and aviation. And these are discussions that we are having in the Netherlands, quite fierce discussions about where should the focus be? Should it be on heavy duty or should it be on private cars? And what role do the syn fuels or e-fuels have in the whole transition? So it's key that we discuss this in early phases, now hydrogen is developing in the whole economy and the whole energy system. Key investments need to be made by all relevant stakeholders, and many of them are involved here as representative of a whole sector, but in the transport and energy sector simultaneously, in order to allow Europe to become climate neutral in 2050. And this was recently again stated in the Green Deal the Commission published. In order to support the transition to smart and sustainable mobility on the ground, we need cross-sectoral cooperation and investments. Instruments such as the synergy calls under the CEF, what is it, CEF? You know the CEF. Support that cross-sectoral cooperation and support investments throughout Europe, thereby enabling our transport and energy corridors to become climate neutral, future-proof, and allow for new business models. This is shown in the Northern Netherlands, where TSO2020 was one of the important stepping stones in the development of a hydrogen ecosystem, paving the way for the first European hydrogen valley, the Heaven project, with 20 million euro European co-funding and a total investment of more than 80 million euros, triggering not only investments, but also innovation in the region. We see businesses developing, innovating, changing as a result of these projects. So they're very important stepping stones on the way to a zero emission energy system. In short, one could say that synergy has led to heaven in the Netherlands. Having said that, I wish us a very fruitful day, morning, and discussions. I'm very glad to have been part of this, both privately and as a ministry, in this project from the start. And well, we see for the future also a very important role for synergy calls. A very fruitful day, and I hope to be speaking with you later in the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And we've had a number of people, everyone knows what CEF is apparently.
Connecting Europe Facility.
Connecting Europe Facility.
Just slipped my mind at the moment.
Yeah. I was going to say, so lots of people are here this morning, and lots of people are obviously engaged in the debate. So there you go. You've got a lot of answers. Thank you very much for that, for giving us an idea of what's going on in the Netherlands, and indeed I guess the pioneering nature of this first synergy project. and really what it has unleashed, I would say, in the Netherlands and Europe more broadly. Let's turn next then to Jutta Paulus, who joins us from the European Parliament. She's a member of the Green Group there, and comes from Germany, where she also works on the federal as part of the Federal Working Group on Energy of the Green Party. She's originally a pharmacist, I saw, so that's nice to know, and currently sits on the Parliament's Environment Committee and is also a substitute for ITRE and TRAN, so Industry, Energy, Research and Transport. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you especially for organizing this important event, because we have heard a lot of noise around hydrogen, and I think it is very important to focus on where do we actually want to use hydrogen, and there Dirk has already given us a great focus. You probably all know that the European Commission has issued a hydrogen strategy this year, where some of the things that Dirk has already mentioned are given broad attention, especially when it comes to the use of hydrogen in the areas where it is actually without alternative, or without reasonable alternative, I should say. And I would really like to stress that in our use of this costly and precious energy carrier, we should concentrate on the areas where hydrogen can really play a big role to decarbonize the sectors. Of course, we have to talk about the steel industry, we have to talk about the chemical industry, but as this is a transport agenda today, I want to stress that in transport, we have to look at the sectors where electrification is not feasible, or at least not easily feasible. You will never have a container ship running on batteries from Shanghai to Rotterdam. You will probably never have an airplane running on batteries from Amsterdam to New York. So basically, these are the sectors where we will need hydrogen or hydrogen-derived synthetic fuels. But there we really have to look at the energy efficiency principle. To produce synthetic fuels, you need about 8 times more energy, counted well to wheel, if as compared to using electrification directly. So everyone that's talking to me about synthetic fuels being the savior of the internal combustion engine in people's cars, I just ask them whether they will be ready to promote to our citizens that we need 8 times as many wind parks or solar panels in order to produce all this energy that's needed for that. And this energy efficiency first principle should be at the core of all our policy, because we will need to perform this transition at incredible speed in order to become climate neutral in time, so as to at least slow down the climate change. And therefore we just cannot afford going onto paths where we need ever more renewable energy in order to decarbonize. I was a bit concerned that the European Commission did come out with a hydrogen strategy, but did not come out with a renewable energy strategy. Of course, we will see the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive next year as part of the Fit for 55 package. Commission has already announced that this will be on the table, and I think that's very important. But I would have liked to see a dedicated strategy, a dedicated program for the rollout of renewables all over Europe. We will today hear about the offshore strategy, where mainly offshore wind will be the issue, also maybe a bit tidal and wave energy, but to a lesser extent. But there again, this is one puzzle piece in the whole picture. But we really, or in my view, we should have made sure that we have sufficient capacity in renewables in order to produce at least part of the hydrogen that we need domestically. And there, in my view, we have an industrial policy to fulfill. Hydrogen production via electrolyzers from renewable energy will be one of the key technologies of the 21st century. That's my very firm belief. We will need hydrogen, as I said, in industry and transport, and also for long-term storage. And this technology, I want to keep Europe as the front runner in these technologies of the production of electrolyzers. We have let slip away solar technology 10 years ago, when China decided that they would support this with really large state aid. And we Europeans have said, okay, if the Chinese can do it, we're fine. And today, most patents are actually, patents in solar technology are actually derived in China. And I don't want to the European hydrogen industry to go to the same path. So you will never be able to keep the front runner position if you don't provide a domestic market. And that's one of the main reasons why I think we should make sure that we have a hydrogen production in Europe that's worthwhile. And I do believe that this is actually feasible. We have seen prices for solar electricity in Portugal lying below 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a great position to start from. And I think that the cost aggression in renewables will even go further. And we can push the cost aggression in electrolyzers if we now provide a clear path where we want to be. And that's provided in the hydrogen strategy. And I'm really thankful to the European Commission for that. But we have to, educate policymakers how we are actually going to use hydrogen. Because I have heard from many of my colleagues, well, we should just mix hydrogen into the fossil gas network, because then everyone can take part in this revolution. And I think no one would actually make the proposal to mix champagne with cheap table wine. But that would be exactly what happens if you mix this very precious energy carrier into something where you can just keep using fossil gas, so to speak. We have to make sure that we are not wasting hydrogen in heating our buildings or in keeping the internal combustion engine on the road, but that we should create these hydrogen valleys for the sectors where we actually need them. One last point when it comes to the production of hydrogen, because today hydrogen is produced from fossil methane, and while people are always talking, well, we can make blue hydrogen, we just have to use CCS in order to get rid of the carbon dioxide that is produced in the process, they tend to forget that the climate, that methane has more to it than only the CO2 production. We have, in the pre-chain, we have methane emissions, which happen at the well, in the pipeline, at the valves. We have very good data on this now that the Copernicus program has started measuring methane emissions all over the world. And these methane emissions, as methane is such a powerful greenhouse gas, actually take down any advantage which gas might have over coal, because methane is being more than 80 times as powerful as CO2 on a 20-year time frame. So we have to make sure that we really minimize these emissions. This can be done through regulation, but we cannot regulate the countries where the methane is actually produced. We can have a certification there, but we should certainly not start new value chains using methane and ramping up the demand of a fossil fuel. So it has to be green hydrogen. We have to make sure that we have the renewable energy capacity in Europe ready, so we have a substantial domestic production, and we should make sure that we keep our technology leadership in this field. I will stop here. I have already overstepped my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jutta, for a lot of very interesting points. We could probably have a debate just on the back of that, but I'm going to resist. I haven't seen any questions come in from any of our participants so far. I think everyone's probably still digesting all the points you made. You will be back, I think, for the debate later on today. So if you do have questions, anyone, there'll be a later opportunity to put those to Jutta then. So what we wanted to do next one was that put a few questions to you, everyone who's joined us this morning, to get a better idea, in the absence of being able to, for everyone to see one another, a better idea of who's actually with us at the moment. So could we launch a first polling question, which is basically asking you, where are you based? And you can obviously just pick one of these. And let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so far it looks like everyone is in Western and Northwestern Europe. Let's see if we have anyone more broadly than that. One of the questions indeed that we prepared for the debate was, how do we extend this hydrogen story beyond Northwestern Europe? So that seems very pertinent in light of the poll results. We'll leave it just another moment and see whether we have anyone from further afield. There we go. Now the results have adjusted. Someone from a few people from the Balkans. That's great. Okay. You can see the numbers still coming up. The proportions look fairly stable, however, so I think we can say from this, most of us are based here in Western, Northwestern Europe, which I think is also for the moment where the momentum has been greatest for a clean hydrogen economy. Let's move to a second question. Let's move to a second question, which is about what you do in life. Which sector do you represent? And let's see. Here we have more of a spread, with policymakers coming out on top, although it's nicely spread out. So we have looks like we have a good selection of different sectors with us this morning.
Sonia, the questions seem to not pop up for everyone.
Don't they? Sabrina, is that something you can fix?
Yes, I will try to. I can relaunch this polling.
Let's try it one more time. Don't know if that's any better. I hope everyone can see the
questions are pop-ups. So if you have a pop-up blocker, they don't show, unfortunately.
Okay, we will have more questions. So those of you who may have pop-up blockers switched on, we'll do another question now, and then we have a few more for the debate. So you can perhaps use the coffee break to try and fix that. I think here it looks like we have a reasonable spread, at least with those people who have managed to have had an opportunity to vote. I propose we move on to the third question now. And as I said, the more substantive content questions are for the debate in any case, so that will be more important for everyone to be able to participate then. The final question for now, how close do you think we are to reaching the full potential of large-scale hydrogen deployment in Europe? Are we very close, halfway there, or we still have a long way to go? We still have a long way to go. Well, it has only been on the agenda, newly on the agenda for the last year or two, so that would make sense. So it looks like the numbers have more or less stabilized. 2/3 of you think we still have a long way to go, and about a quarter think we're halfway there. Only very few, 2 people, think we're very close. Well, I'm curious to hear from those two once we get to the debate on what, I suppose, what makes you so optimistic and believing that we really are close to achieving this vision of a full hydrogen economy. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you very much for participating. And we move on then to the first of a series of presentations, as you heard at the start from a series of presentations initially introducing the TSO2020 project, and after that, looking at different aspects of the hydrogen picture. So to introduce the project, which is a project that has played a role, I suppose, in taking us at least halfway there, and presumably also very close for the 2 people who think we're very close. I'd like to hand over to Remco Wassink, who's a senior business developer with Gasunie New Energy. So he works on projects around hydrogen and carbon capture and storage and use. He's originally an industrial engineer. And is now fully focused on the energy transition. So Remco, tell us about TSO 2020.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And thank you all for attending this presentation here about TSO 2020. And I would like to inform you about where we are now in the scope, execution, and what we find out in the research. So maybe if you can show my first slide. Thank you. Well, as you can see, that TSO 2020 has a twofold scope, yeah, we've come a long way so far, and we are about to finish the project. We have still 2 main topics to finish, which is the hydrogen refueling station in Pesse and the hydrogen hub in Delfzijl. I will shortly explain you what this is. Due to problems with permits, business cases, nitrogen crisis, and also the COVID, we had some delays. But for now, we're looking good again. So Pesse has received its permit and is under full construction right now. And for Delfzijl, we ordered trailers and they're on their way from Spain. So it looks like we're going to receive them in February of next year. So as you can see and already mentioned, TSO has 2 main topics, which is research and pilots. On the research side, we have 3 main topics, which are grid stability studies and cost benefit analysis and market studies. And on the other side, we have the pilots, which are the high stock electrolyzer, which is something really important, which I can show you right away in a short movie. We have a trailer hydrogen hub in Delfzijl, where it can be filled and can distribute the hydrogen to local energy points where it's needed. And we have the hydrogen refueling station in Pesse, which is under construction right now, where cars and trailers and trucks can refuel. For the pilots, the high stock installation was opened last year by His Majesty the King Willem-Alexander from the Netherlands. And yeah, I would like to show you now a short movie about what high stock is all about. So if you would be so kind to start the movie now.
Gasunie and its subsidiary Energy Stock have built the first 1 megawatt green hydrogen installation in the Netherlands near its underground gas storage in the province of Groningen. The unit uses green power to separate water into green hydrogen and oxygen in a process called electrolysis. 1 megawatt-hour of green power is converted into 17 kilograms of green hydrogen per hour. To achieve this, around 3,600 solar panels are being installed on the storage site. In addition, the green hydrogen installation is also connected to TenneT's high-voltage electricity grid, through which green power is delivered. 3 containers are installed on site. The first contains equipment to convert the green power to the required voltage for the electrolyzer. The second contains the electrolyzer, in which water is separated into hydrogen and oxygen. The third contains the compressor, which brings the hydrogen to the correct pressure, varying from 200 to 300 bar. The hydrogen is stored in a trailer capable of transporting 800 kilograms of hydrogen to customers in the mobility sector or industry. In the Netherlands and other countries, filling stations are being developed where cars, buses, and other heavy-duty vehicles can fill up with hydrogen, for example, at Green Planet's filling station in Pesse. Filling up takes around 3 minutes, the same as for petrol and diesel cars. A hydrogen car can run for approximately 500 kilometers on a 5-kilogram tank of hydrogen. Green hydrogen can be used as a renewable resource or fuel by the industry. Currently, the industry already uses large quantities of hydrogen as a resource. Hydrogen is a sustainable energy carrier that is desperately needed to realize the targets set out by the draft of the climate agreement. It is CO2-free energy that can bring a balance to our future energy management. The aim of the HyStock project is to boost the green hydrogen market and provide the Netherlands with proof that green hydrogen works. It is an important step towards the large-scale use of green hydrogen in the Dutch energy supply.
I seem to have lost sound. Do you still hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes?
can hear
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll continue. As you can see on this slide, this is where we started with TSO2020. It's all in the north of the Netherlands, and yeah, where you can find Delfzijl, Zuidwending, and Pesse. And we see TSO2020 as a stepping stone to a lot of initiatives for hydrogen in the region. And if you can go to the next slide, you can see what led to. And this is where we started, and this is where we are now in our plans and in our ambitions for the next years. So TSO2020 ignited a lot of things, and I will not go into detail on all these initiatives, but I would like to point out a few. Of course, our own stock, but next to that, you see the timeline on the right. If you look at number 8, there's Jewels, and Jewels is a project where we want to install 20 megawatt of capacity on electrolyzing, and with the potential to even grow to 60 megawatts. And the last 40 megawatts would be for fuels for airplanes. So that might be an interesting connection to what Ms. Paulus just said. If you look at number 9, there you see element 1, and this is in Germany. And this is an initiative from Gasunie, TenneT, and Thyssengas, where we plan to deliver a 100 megawatt electrolyzer. And this is meant to convert wind power into hydrogen, which can be then used in the Ruhr area in Germany. And at number 17, there's another great project, which is the backbone for the Netherlands, because if we want to use all the hydrogen in all the industrial clusters, we need a good infrastructure to distribute all the hydrogen. And in the end, this is also the connection to our neighboring countries. So this is a really important project to deliver. And finally, we have 2 large wind power projects. They're both in the North Sea. One is North H2, where we think of installing 4 gigawatts of wind power. And this will then be dedicated to an electrolyzer in the Delfzijl area to produce green hydrogen. And on the other hand, we have at number 23, the North Sea Wind Power Hub program, which entails a lot of initiatives. The first main goal is to install a 12 gigawatt hub on the North Sea to deliver electricity and hydrogen to the Netherlands, to Germany, and to Denmark. So, as you can see here, TSO2020 has led to a lot of initiatives, and it's a spark to massive developments on hydrogen. If we go to the next slide, I would like to take you into some high-level outcomes on the research part. As I mentioned in the beginning, we had 3 main topics. The first one is the cost-benefit analysis. And I think it's interesting to see from the cost-benefit analysis, and I must say that these 10 minutes are way too short to share all the details in the research. So what I would like to see our site, our website, where you can download all the reports, and the website is TSO2020.eu. We will send it around after this roundtable to you, so you can download the reports for yourself. And well, I think it's interesting to see that the electrolyzer beats the battery, and that's something we found out, which is really important on a lot of areas. But yeah, it can help in stabilizing the net, and yeah, it does it way better than the battery. And on the next slide, we have the grid stability studies. And also here we see that large electrolyzers can play a big part in stabilizing the electricity net. And especially when we will receive a lot of renewable energy sources in the future, then electrolyzers can play a big part in network congestion prevention and voltage control. And yeah, I think maybe Professor van der Meijden can go into detail there later on. And I think one of the important things in the end is that if you look to the next slide, where we can find the highlights from market research.
I'm gonna have to ask you to start coming to a close. Sorry.
This is my final slide, so no problem. As I would say, 10 minutes is way too short to share all the information with you. But if you look at the market, I think yeah, policy should support the deployment. And one of the to do this would be that adding an extra to CO2. So, for example, on top of ETS would really help hydrogen. And it's important. We identified some hotspots in the research, and these hotspots can really boost the demand for hydrogen. And this boost in demand will also provide an economy of scale, which would really help for the H2 production, the infrastructure, and storage. So this was what I can show you from the project so far. As said, we have a lot of more information. We will organize a final event when all the physical topics in the project are finished, and I would like to invite you, and we will invite you all when we are at that point. So thank you very much for your attention, and have a great convention and roundtable.
Thank you very much, Remco. I know 10 minutes is short, and the project obviously has a lot more in it than you can present in 10 minutes. So please, everyone, do go and have a look at the website for some more information. Thank you to René Schutte for answering in the chat box the question from Nicolaus. about on-site storage. I think we've dealt with that, so that's great. Take a look there if you want to read up on it. And I propose we move on to the next presentation. So we have 5 presentations now. The first will focus on policy, then funding, a research perspective, industrial perspective, and finally one focused on partnership and the importance of a network system approach. So I'd like to first of all invite Tudor Constantinescu to take the floor. He's a principal advisor to the Director General for Energy at the European Commission. He's originally engineer and economist, so a perfect combination. And previously did a lot of work on energy efficiency, including heading up the Romanian Agency for Energy Conservation and coordinating energy efficiency work for the Energy Charter Secretariat here in Brussels. Tudor, tell us about hydrogen policy at the Commission.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you for the invitation. And to ease, and I'm very pleased to be with you today, and also to hear the latest development on the TSO2020 projects, which we supported, and we are very happy to see that it's bringing results and also a multiplier effect on initiatives. As you all know, we came with a strategy this summer. So next slide, please. And this strategy on hydrogen came in a certain context. First of all, allow me just 2 minutes to say it is a Green Deal, of course, and now with more ambitious targets for 2030 already to bring decarbonization to become a reality. Faster means to invest more in the beginning, so not to delay and to hope to decrease emissions after 2030. This has the big advantage of avoiding stranded assets and also avoiding some lock-in effects. This is very important. And second, it so happens, and that's why the Green Deal is a very important tool to support also going out of this health and sanitary crisis, which came unfortunately this year, and to support the recovery plans. So it is in this context that also the hydrogen strategy came into the picture, linked and building on the energy system integration. So we have seen hydrogen, in particular renewable hydrogen, as a key enabler, as it was also said before, for decarbonization of a lot of carbon-intensive sectors and for stabilizing the electricity system through energy storage. And we see that chemical storage is becoming more and more an option for whenever we speak over days and over gigawatt hours of electricity to be stored. So with growing shares of renewables, and now with the 2030 target, we realize that we may need to have up to 65% of renewable electricity in the energy mix by 2030 already. So the role of storage, of large-scale storage, and of hydrogen, therefore, will increase. In the hydrogen strategy, we try to address the key elements to make this a reality. So first of all, to link this to an investment agenda, we spoke about 20 to 40 billion of investment in electrolyzers, but for which we need also to invest more than 200 up to 300 billion euros in renewables increased capacity. So what was said by Mrs. Powell before, it's very true. And we underline this because we have targets for 2024 already of 6 gigawatts electrolyzers and 2030 of 40 gigawatts. And we also acknowledge the potential in the neighborhood regions under the international dimension and what the industry is willing to develop further. Now, we need to boost the demand and scale up production. And this is what I mentioned through, first of all, the targets, but also the financing, but also the rules and the markets, which I'll come back to this, the policy actions which we try to put in place, and I'll refer to this in more detail in a moment. Also to develop the infrastructures, being pure refueling infrastructures for vehicles, with particular for heavy duty, but also looking forward towards maritime applications, also looking at the options for synthetic fuels, in particular for aviation, because there are sectors where would not be possible to decarbonize without using hydrogen as a key enabler. And this is important to mention that in our also analysis for the long-term decarbonization scenario for 2050, it's clear that an important percentage, maybe up to half of the energy final consumption will be in the form of electricity, but the other half may not be electricity. So maybe in the form of gases, of liquid fuels, maybe some solid biomass, but in particular for gases and liquid fuels, hydrogen will be a key enabler. For this, we also need more research. We have already developed a good partnership with industry and with the research community in the framework of the fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking over the years, which brought us where we are now moving in the last 10 years for electrolyzers, for example, from the order of tens of kilowatts now to 10 megawatt in Cologne, 20 under construction, and we launch now a call for 100 megawatt electrolyzer under the horizon, and the Green Deal call. So this brings to the international dimension, which is also very important to exploit the potential we have around Europe, but also to set somehow the scene and to ensure a level playing field at a global level. When we speak about certification, when we want to decarbonize, we need mainly renewable and low carbon hydrogen, which is also acknowledged as playing potentially a role, in particular for the 2030 targets of decarbonization. So in this context, internationally, with the Clean Energy Ministerial, with International Partnership for Hydrogen Economy, with Mission Innovations, where we brought in the concept of hydrogen valleys, developed at European level. We try to support also renewable and low carbon hydrogen paving its way in global markets, because currently 95% of the hydrogen used in the world is neither low carbon nor renewable, so it's just gray hydrogen. Of course, to do this, we need all the stakeholders involved. That's why on 8th of July, not only the system integration strategy and the hydrogen strategy were announced, but also the Hydrogen Alliance, building up on the previous partnerships with all the stakeholders, but trying to bring this to a scale where we can engage better renewable producers, where we can engage better the users and also policy makers at the same time. Next slide, please. So these are the main elements, as you see, of the strategy, which I have already mentioned as the targets for 2024, 2030, with a view to achieve on 2050 this scale up to all hard to decarbonize sectors, and including the synthetic fuels, the EU-wide infrastructure, and an open international market where Euro can be a benchmark. Now, meanwhile, we try what I have said before, and to develop all these projects and concepts, for which we need to look deeply into a variety of actions. So next slide. And here I start with the energy system integration, which looks at how to make energy efficiency first, if you want, applied concept not only at the level of components, being appliances or buildings or cars, but really at energy system level. Encouraging also circular economy, making more efficient use of energy, and promoting where it makes sense direct electrification and heat pumps, for example, but also looking at how we decarbonize this significant part of the energy system, which is based on molecules and not on electrons. And here already in this strategy, we are speaking about promoting the renewable hydrogen, and as a main tool having the strategy, but also the RED and the aviation maritime initiatives through the EU funding. Looking at the energy markets for decarbonized and distributed resources, here's a review of the gas regulatory framework, and creating a level playing field across sectors, and the work on state aid on gas legislation is very important in this area. Also, in this context, of course, we looked at digitalization and the possible links which we need to make between the concept of sector integration and digitalization, which are the two main opportunities for making the energy transition successful, involving also consumers at more distributed level of generation, so decentralized and making them prosumer, but also creating these opportunities of better integrating and planning the energy carriers and the energy infrastructures and the energy resources. And this is what we continue to do in the hydrogen strategy. Next slide, where in fact we have put the focus on creating an investment agenda. And here we have the figures about what I was mentioning, the significant amount of funds necessary, but which will trigger big investments. We need an extra 80 to 120 gigawatt hour of capacity, gigawatts of capacity of renewables to be installed in Europe. And for this Clean Hydrogen Alliance, and then all the financing instruments, but also the revision of state aid, the support provided to the cohesion policy, and also recovery and resilience plans will have to support this investment agenda. Boosting demand and scaling up production. Here we look at comprehensive terminology. This is what we have to do to ensure the certification, to ensure a level playing field, to have also support schemes, in particular for renewable hydrogen and for low carbon hydrogens. We introduced some ideas there, and also possibility for having demand side policies and maybe even targets. Eventually, we will look into all these options for renewable hydrogen in particular. We need to develop the infrastructure. So this is about the planning of the transport, storage, and the dispatch infrastructure to ensure access to liquid hydrogen markets and the integrity of the internal gas market on the other hand, because there are interactions, and we'll try to develop this, taking into account the diversity of opportunities and options across Europe and the need to move and to make a sustainable transition. So therefore, the revisions under TENI already would look on the role of infrastructure for hydrogen. In some cases, it may be wise to go for a complete repurposing of the gas infrastructure towards hydrogen. But this will be needed to be analyzed, will be also part of 10-year development plan, but also will look under CEF, and the legislation and the possible regulatory framework will be further developed.
Tudor, I have to ask you to wrap up.
I will finish in a minute.
So we can take one or two questions to you. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Then on research and innovation, I have mentioned the scaling up of electrolyzers and the continuation of the partnership, fuel cells and hydrogen partnership as a Clean Hydrogen Partnership. And on international, I think I already mentioned the many initiatives looking on one hand at the region as opportunities, neighborhood policy, but also the international dimension with many countries around the globe, developing both technologies and also promoting development of renewable hydrogen like Australia, Chile, and so on. And on the very last slide, next is just to say thank you, and if it is any question, happy to take it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I realize you need to leave us in a few moments, so I had asked people to send through questions if they have any. I've seen 3 come in. So the first one is from Nienke Homan, a Green Dutch member of the Dutch Parliament based up in Groningen. She asks, how do you think we can boost or guarantee the demand side, demand for hydrogen in the best way? Do you want to hear all the questions, or you want to start with that?
Yeah, on this, look, we need a combination. It's clear that we'll need a combination of measures. First of all, we work to provide hydrogen and to make hydrogen competitive, in particular renewable hydrogen competitive. For this, we need access to more competitive electricity, renewable electricity, and by encouraging production of renewables will succeed this. At the same time, to reduce the capacity of electrolyzers through research, innovation, and scaling up. So we have now the 100 megawatt electrolyzer, and we know we'll move into the directions of hundreds of megawatt capacities multiplied across Europe. And on the other hand, to create in this way an opportunity for replacing the existing hydrogen demand in Europe, and in particular in industry where there is big scale in fertilizers, in refining, and to move subsequently into steel and the other big sectors. At the same time, heavy duty for transport and maritime applications will be encouraging markets, either for hydrogen directly or maybe for ammonia or other fuels which we can produce from hydrogen.
So that would be improving, or I guess making the production of hydrogen more cost competitive. But what about specifically introducing or stimulating that demand? So for example, by introducing, I guess it could be, if you're thinking of hydrogen in buildings, which I know Jutta Paulus was less keen on, but a blending mandate, or it could be something in the Renewable Energy Directive, could be contracts for difference.
Yeah,
Is there anything, to stimulate demand?
I have mentioned already the contracts for difference, also
Yeah.
the possibility of having targets in some end-use sectors, but of course we have to judge is where it making more economic sense and where it's more also user-friendly. And based on this, prioritization is indeed towards heavy-duty transport, and where hydrogen can also make a better business case. Yeah. And then towards carbon-intensive industries, these are really the true potentials.
And could the EU ETS make a difference? A higher carbon price, would that help?
A higher carbon price will always
Yeah.
help, and in the future we do not exclude any option, and we can even have in some cases synthetic methane developing based on renewable hydrogen with carbon capture from the air. So this is also an option which we should not close, of course.
The other question, I'll put them together, is about low carbon hydrogen. Do we need that to pave the way to renewable hydrogen, or should we focus on renewable hydrogen right from the start? And a related question is, low carbon hydrogen, do you include hydrogen produced from nuclear power in that? Does the Commission include that as well?
Do you still hear me, or because I didn't hear you?
Still hear you.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you've frozen.
Some problems with the internet connection.
Yeah, now you're back. Did you hear the question?
No, I didn't hear, sorry.
Okay, so it was a question about low carbon hydrogen. Do we need low carbon hydrogen to pave the way to green or renewable hydrogen? Or should we focus on green hydrogen from the start? And a related question is, in low carbon hydrogen, do you also include hydrogen from nuclear power?
So we have to look in the strategy, low carbon hydrogen, yes, include the various forms of hydrogen, which are really coming from sources with low carbon. Now, in particular, in what place low carbon hydrogen, which I know that the question is made, is the so-called blue hydrogen. We avoided the color, so gasiforming with CCS. We acknowledge the fact, as I said, currently 95% of the hydrogen is coming from steam reforming or from coal gasification without any form of CCS. So we acknowledge that we need this as well, in particular to achieve the 2030 target. So maybe in a transition phase, but the focus is definitely, and I think none of this should be done to the prejudice of promoting and building the business case for renewable hydrogen, because we know that in the energy mix, if we want to achieve carbon neutrality, we will have to have renewables at the center of the energy mix. And to succeed to integrate efficiently renewables, hydrogen will be absolutely key. Otherwise, we cannot. It's working hand in hand, the business case for large-scale renewables and for hydrogen deployment in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we'll leave it there. I haven't seen you've answered them all. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I wish you a good rest of the day.
I was very pleased to be with you. It's the
Thank
same.
you.
I'm a good discussion.
Thank you. And we hand over then to Andreas Boschen, so a colleague of Tutors, also at the European Commission, where he is heads up the CEF, so the Connecting Europe Facility Fund at INEA, the Innovation and Networks Executive Agency. He's been with the Commission for the past 20 years and heading up this unit for the past 6 years. So you've seen, well, you obviously know what you're talking about. And basically, he's in charge of managing the financial support to infrastructure projects in the areas of energy transport, but also, broadband telecommunications, etc. So talk us through the CEF, and I guess what we can expect, hoping that a new budget and recovering fund will be signed off at some point. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Sonia, and good morning to all. It's also from my side pleasure being here with you and looking at a project coming to results. If I can go to the next slide, I will try to respect my 10 minutes. So I try to say a word about the results we are achieving in the Connecting Europe facility. Tudor covered already the policy context, so I will rather focus on the next MFF and the CEF2, and I will also say a couple of words about synergies. Next slide, please. So indeed, we are managing the Connecting Europe facility, which is the one facility supporting infrastructure and networks in the areas of transport, energy, and telecommunications. We have quite a budget, 28.3 billion, which we are managing right now, but you have seen also just for the H2 sector how much investment is needed. So it's a lot of money, but it's not enough. And with this money, we are covering transport, almost 1,000 projects, energy, and then also telecommunication. As you can see, we are serving more than 8,000 municipalities across Europe on Wi-Fi for Europe. And we have a synergy sector, small, 7 actions are in synergy, where transport and energy come together. And this is a moment to congratulate the project we are joining here, the TSO2020, for a successful implementation so far. You have been indeed one of the 7 highlighted here. You were lucky to get a, no, you're not lucky, you deserved to receive more than 7 million EU contribution with a high EU co-funding rate of more than 60% because it is synergies. And indeed, you are bringing together the 10E, so the electricity networks. There's a cable between Denmark and the Netherlands, which is one of the interconnections we are funding. And you're also serving the transport infrastructure, the core network corridors, whether they are the North Sea Baltic or the Rhine Alpine. And this is really the synergies we are looking for. Next slide, please. So how are we supporting hydrogen projects under the Connecting Europe facility? And we are doing this mainly in the transport sector, where we have a priority called new technologies and innovation. And maybe also reacting to previous speakers, we are not only supporting hydrogen there. The majority of the actions and our money goes into electric charging for road. But we are, of course, also supporting maritime vessels, be it electric, be it scrubber, be it LNG, and so on. So hydrogen is part of this new technologies and innovation priority, where you can see some figures. We have some actions across member states, 13, which is good. It's a good geographical spread, but it's not 27. We are, of course, focusing on the infrastructure. So we are supporting the building of refueling stations, but there's also then the fleet, which is needed for it, be it mainly buses or trolleys. Then we have under the synergy call your project, very well. And let me also stress that one of the projects, I think maybe the colleague later will talk about it also, there are projects managing to combine different sources of EU funding, which we find very good. So under the Merlin one, they managed to get our CEF money for the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure, the refueling station. And they, from the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking, they got money for the fleet, for the buses, and I think there's Horizon Europe and Life money, and this is again synergies, which is very good. Next slide, please. So I think Tudor covered this very elegantly and very competent, so I don't think I need to say anything, just maybe the last one. Yes, there will be financial support under CEF2 also to contribute to the hydrogen infrastructure, and this will be detailed more in my next slide, where Sonia, you pointed out that we are still waiting for the green light, and there's a European Council starting tonight, and we still need a bit of homework, I would say, to get there. But I think the figure we are putting there, 28 billion euro, is the figure we are expecting as grant monies, as money for grants under CEF2 handed over to us in INEA. This is, of course, the money serving the entire Connecting Europe facility. So it is there to develop and modernize the networks in transport, energy, and digital. We will, of course, focus also now on cross-border cooperation in the field of renewable energy. And I think we saw also some good perspectives from the TSO 2020 projects, how to go further. And of course, we promote sustainable mobility because we are definitely part of the European Green Deal. European infrastructure has to become green. Otherwise, there is no European Green Deal, and we would like to push our decarbonization commitments. And obviously, resources are scarce. We don't have too much money for what the needs are. So therefore, we have to emphasize the synergies because then we can make a better use of our money. Next slide, please. And how will we achieve more synergies within CEF2 and also beyond CEF2 with other instruments. So first of all, we will continue with the cross-sectorial work programs and calls, transport and energy, transport and digital, energy and digital. So this is for the parent DGs to set out and to set up. And these projects will always benefit from the highest co-funding rate of the sector concerned. So if the co-funding rate is highest in energy, they will get it from the energy side. If it's higher in transport, they'll get it from the transport side. A novelty which might be interesting for some of the project promoters, which is to make it a bit easier for you. So if you have a good project in a sector, in a transport or energy sector, which we like very much, and on top of your transport or energy objectives, you have an ancillary investment from the other sector, which makes a lot of sense and produces synergies, well, you can cover this. So you don't need to wait for a synergy call and for a complicated double scope and so on. You can do it within a single project, and up to 20% of the total eligibility cost can be covered, even if you're doing an energy part in a transport sector. So we hope this will stimulate more synergies. Another way of stimulating synergies is that under this new CEF energy, there is a new window for cross-border renewables, and of course there are then synergies popping up with the electricity. From our side, we are not only managing in INEA the Connecting Europe facility, we are also managing the Innovation Fund from DG Klima, and in the future we will cover the entire Horizon Europe Cluster 5, which is climate, energy and mobility, and we will take over the LIFE program. So this shows you that a lot of synergies will be possible in the agency as from next year, and we will indeed become the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. So our acronym will be we'll start with a C for climate, and we will, from INEA, we will move to CINEA. And then I'm at the end, and on my next slide, I invite you to keep in touch, because if you're now asking me the question, when will all this happen? Of course, we need a deal on the MFF, we need a legal basis in the new CEF regulation, we will have work programs agreed with the member states in the different committees, and then we will open calls and invite project promoters to submit proposals. We would expect this can happen as from the second quarter in 2021. So stay in touch, keep in touch, watch our website where the information about future calls and so on will be published. That's all from my side. Again, congratulations to this successful project, and looking forward maybe one day indeed to visit on site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And you will stay for the Q&A, will you be able to, since we're running a little bit late? Yeah, okay. So if you have questions to Andreas, feel free to send those through. We'll move on then to Mart van der Meijden, who's going to talk to us about from the research perspective. He's an electrical engineer, twofold position. So he's a professor at the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands, and he's also innovation manager with TenneT, and represented TenneT, so the Dutch and German now TSO, in the TSO2020 project. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sonja. Good morning, everyone. I would like to focus on hydrogen and its synergies, and all its benefits from our project. We did some learnings. Next slide. Yes, thank you. And I will focus on usage is the key. So system mindset is needed. And I'm happy with Jutta Paulus, where she said well to wheel, 8 times better performance. For hydrogen, I know for electrical car, it's about 5 times. So I'm really interested in how we can reach this. And Dirk Schaap's talking about cross-sectoral cooperation. And I will go into that also more in the context. Next slide, please. This is already said enough, so next slide. Yes, the molecule world today is still much larger than the electricity world. Hopefully in 2050, it will be 50% electricity and 50% molecules. And today it's all about electricity usage to make the difference, and the energy usage. Next slide, please. So if you have green molecules, it will be used in future for green energy usage, but also green feedstock, green chemicals, and green materials. So I'm talking about power to gas and power to X. Next slide, please. And it's not about having hydrogen or electrolyzers for for stabilizing the electricity grid. No, it's about first focus on realizing hydrogen production. So install more electrolyzers and so on. And as a byproduct, an extra product from electrolyzers, for example, is delivering ancillary service to the electricity system. So you have extra benefits, extra income. And it's all about stabilizing the frequency, flexibility, and resilience. Next slide, please. Here, gas meets electricity, some small education. If you have 1 gigawatt usage, and an ideal superconducting wire will need 1 gigawatt wind farm size. Next slide, please, where we see some figures. So in HVDC, you see that you just need a little bit more wind farm size. While if you have this transmitting hydrogen and producing electricity, you need 2 times more wind farms, like Jutta Paul has also mentioned in looking from usage to production. So this is not a way to manage the congestion, but with electrolyzers you can do that in another way. Next slide, please. One of the benefits of hydrogen is, of course, the huge transmission potential, 15 gigawatt in one pipe, compared with 2 gigawatt in a HVDC cable. Next slide, please. And another benefit is the large storage potential. We talk about terawatt hours in hydrogen and megawatt hours and some hours or days in electricity. So there's a 1 million factor difference. So there are some issues you have to take care of, and there are quite a lot of benefits in hydrogen system. Next slide, please. We talked about the electrical vehicle factor 5 in say well to wheel. If you see it in 1 gigawatt electrical vehicles, then you need 1.4 wind farm size. To do it a smart way in 2050 with, for example, yes, households, buildings, microgrid, DC, medium voltage DC, fuel cell, combined heat and power, use all energy, power and heat, then you have really a smart way to use the hydrogen and to use also the electrolyzer. Here you reduce already 0.6 gigawatt on wind farm production to do it in this smart way. And again here, this microgrid system can also deliver ancillary services to the power system. And you can also integrate solar heat and power. So that means hydrogen and its synergies with wind, heat, power, and solar bring affordable, sustainable, and resilient solutions for 2050. But first, what we have to do is something close to reality today. Next slide, please. And I will come back to, 1 moment later. One of the results of the TSO2020 research is the ancillary service by electrolyzers. Here you see a frequency is dropping because of short circuit, and in traditional system or in say a sustainable system with many power electronics and not so many say synchronous machines, the frequency drops very rapidly and very deep, so I have a deep nadir. But with electrolyzers and batteries, they step in early, as you can see here, the less fast dropping of the frequency. Next slide, please. That results in a less deep nadir. Next slide, please. And here you see the green one is an example of the electrolyzer. So with the electrolyzer, you stabilize the frequency in a better way than in a traditional system. Next slide, please. Then here, how to manage congestion. It's not by producing electricity via hydrogen, but it's, for example, if you have wind power, so wind power at sea, offshore wind, and you bring it to the shore, we have already storage capacity and usage in the harbor of Rotterdam and storage in the north of Netherlands. So there you can place electrolyzers And by that, you produce hydrogen, and you reduce the transmission of electricity into the grid. This is really, really a cost-benefit approach. And the other one is what I showed with these future cities based upon microgrids. And so today we should concentrate on first electrifying the industry, produce hydrogen close to the industry and close to the coast and close to the storage. And later on, you can go more deeper inland. And that helps also the power system. Next slide, please. Finally, I was talking about new solutions, thinking from the uses, as also Jutta Paulus did. So uses is key, is not the saying. I would say uses is the key to come to new solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that and for keeping well within your time. So thank you. Once again, if you have questions for Mart, send those in through the chat and we'll take them to him in a moment. I'd like to welcome René Schutte next, who's joining us also from Gasunie. He's been with Gasunie since the mid-2000s and has been heading up their hydrogen program for the last 2 years now. So tell us about Gasunie, I guess, what you've achieved so far and your vision going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Sonja, for the introduction. Actually, I'm not going to discuss too much of what Gasunie does at this moment in time, because I believe that Remco already took care of it. This time I tried to look at hydrogen and synergy, which is, let's say, the topic, the theme of this series of presentations. And I'm going to shortly reflect on some of the remarks that have been made in the previous presentations, because I think part of what I was planning to say has already been said. So I'm going to make a small amendment, if you like. Please go to the first slide. And I want to recall on this picture. It was already just discussed by Mart that currently, if you look at the picture, the right bottom, the electricity use versus the molecule use, which is about 80-20 at this moment in time. Obviously, in future, this will grow. More electricity will come to become available. But what you see from this picture, and we should not forget, it's the flexibility, meeting the difference between demand and supply that's basically being taken care of by gas. It's much more easy and cost efficient to store large volumes of gas compared to large volumes of electrons. So actually, this is what we need to cater for in the future. We have an energy transition. Energy transition will take 30 years. And we need to come up with a new system that allows us to still have the energy available at the times that we need it. Though, of course, we're going to reduce energy, though we're going to make a difference in the energy carrier that we're going to use. But in the end, this is part of the energy transition question. And predominantly, it's all about CO2 emission reduction. And I believe that we should make steps as soon as possible to reduce the CO2 emission. We can't get to a perfect world at one time. So it will take a pathway. So we will also need to take the time and realize that all the solutions that we may need to take in the coming years may not be the final solution in 2050, but are steps towards decarbonization of the environment. And going to the left bottom or left top picture, this is also to recall one of the additional challenges we have, where gas now taking the difference between supply and demand. The supply of renewable energy is not flat. It's coming basically at the profile of the wind and sun, which makes it more intermittent and more volatile. So this is an additional question to solve for the flexibility issue that we have at hand. And going to the next slide. This basically shows the opportunity that we have in Europe. And I think it's already said in the beginning. We are perfectly located to build industry and to build our environment towards a renewable energy system and towards a decarbonized energy system. We have a lot of solar and wind resources either in Europe or nearby, in North Africa predominantly, or Portugal, south of Europe. We have large infrastructures that become available in future, partly because we're going to change our energy system. And we have a lot of opportunities to store gas in salt caverns, which at this moment in time at least looks the most promising way of storing large volumes of gas at least. Former gas fields seem to be less suitable for that as it looks right now. So we have this opportunity, and this also means we have the opportunity to build our economy around that, and to build also companies that can provide our technology to go into the energy transition. Going to the next slide. One of the things that as a group of infrastructure companies we did is we wanted to show that all the developments in gas, in hydrogen around Europe can in the end be connected with existing infrastructure, or predominantly existing infrastructure. We have large lengths of pipeline throughout Europe, partly becoming available when natural gas transmission will be reduced in future. And with this infrastructure, actually what we can do is we can connect all the supply and demand centers throughout Europe. And it does include, of course, areas where we can have import of hydrogen via sea, for instance, in ports. So we have this opportunity at hand. We can build this picture, what you see on the right side, can be available by 2040. And the cost of it is quite limited. You're talking about, for the full network, investments somewhere between 30 and 60 billions. It's a lot of money, of course, but compared to the energy itself, to the commodity, it's a very small amount of money. This is also one of the key issues if you look from the industry perspective, and not talking about the industry in gas transport, but the industry on the demand side. What the demand side needs is to have a kind of a stable outlook of availability of their energy needs or their feedstock, because hydrogen is not only feedstock, it's or an energy carrier, but it's also feedstock. So it's kind of security supply, and for that infrastructure is needed. For hydrogen, we need to build the full value chain, coming from the renewable energy sources already discussed, wind, solar, for the future, until the demand areas, and every step needs to be built up. Everybody is waiting for each other to take the first step. So what we can do in the immediate time is to build, let's say, the infrastructure connections to be able for supply and demand to meet. Obviously, this should be done in steps, phased. You don't build the full system at once. It's only to be built at the time that you need it. But you should start with small ecosystems to build up the full value chain from supply to demand. Going to the next slide. One of the things that TenneT together with Cassini studied already over a year ago is Infrastructure Outlook 2050, where we had a look at the system needs for energy transport by 2050. And I think it was already explained in previous presentation that capability of gas to transport large volumes of energy is much more cost efficient than it is to do that with electricity. Of course, from the perspective that you need to construct new infrastructure. Obviously, infrastructure that's already there should be used as much as possible. So this is what TenneT and Cassini jointly concluded. And they came up with the fact that if you want to build such a system, you need to have a control over the location of the electrolyzers to make sure that you don't invest in infrastructure which is not needed. There is a need for system integration. We have now pillars of energy being electricity, being heat, being gas, but we need to integrate the system and provide the energy that is needed to the end users. There's need for storage, already discussed it. There will be an expansion of electricity infrastructure to come from the 80-20 to say the 50-50, and we need to build import. It's not a self-sufficient system that we have currently in Europe for energy supply, feedstock supply, and that's also not what we will have in future. But this is what we need to build, and we need to cooperate on the different lines to bring this together. Please go to the next slide. One of the examples of the cooperation is at the front end of electricity, where electricity is made, renewable energy via offshore wind in Northwest Europe. Southern Europe, it may be more solar. What we need to find out is the most efficient way to build these new wind farms and to connect them to, in the end, the energy demand. It can be done via electricity cables, but it can also be done via hydrogen, because at some moment in time, we need to cater for the fact that we have intermittent production on the one hand, but also a very seasonal pattern in use of energy. So we need to cater for not only the takeoff, the supply of the energy, but also for the storage of the energy to make sure that we have sufficient energy available at the time that we need it. This should be done in a broader sense, not country by country, but it makes sense to do that more on a European level, to work together, like in this example of North Sea Wind Power Hub with the surrounding countries around the North Sea to build and construct the offshore wind, and together build also the infrastructure to bring the energy to shore. One of the things that I want to mention here is that I always see the discussion of efficiency popping up in these discussions. What to do if you have converted it from one energy carrier into another energy carrier, converted back, you will lose energy. Yeah, that's correct. But I think it's not about that issue, about efficiency. It's about, in the end, system integration that we need to go to. And it's also accepting that we can't do that in one go in the most efficient way. So there will be intermediate solutions, which are not, let's say, the end target, but can help in the intermediate target to build up the renewable infrastructure and again provide energy to decarbonize the end users industry. Also, in view of this remark made earlier on where should you apply hydrogen, I will round it off about Sonia. Where to use hydrogen, for instance, maritime and aviation were mentioned as examples. But if you're going to build in the end an infrastructure to provide, for instance, heavy-duty transport fueling stations, it would make sense to also use that for passenger cars, because it's still there on built in the different countries. Last slide is what we need to do in terms of joining efforts, public-private. This is an example of an IPCEI, the Green Octopus, which is infrastructure in Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, to connect large industries like steel industry with areas of supply, and to build together the full ecosystem in larger. This can become part of a European infrastructure project under the IPCEI, which is basically a status that allows for more state aid than currently is available. This is what synergy is about from a little different perspective, and this is where I would like to leave my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, René, for I think a very comprehensive look at what synergy means in practice, and the possibilities you see there for hydrogen to play a role in a more integrated energy system moving forward. Once again, if you have questions to René, send them through the chat and we'll put those to him in a moment. I'd like to welcome our final speaker in this series of presentations then, Nikolaos Lemperopoulos, who's a project manager at the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. He's originally a mechanical engineer who's worked in the energy field for more than 30 years, 20 of those on hydrogen energy. So looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you to TSO2020 for inviting the fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking. I will briefly present how the FCAJU is helping implement EU research and innovation policies in the field of hydrogen and fuel cells. We don't do policy, we implement policy. Next slide, please. The FCAJU is a PPP, a public-private partnership between the European Commission, being the public part, and European industry and researchers, being the private part. Its aim is to bring hydrogen fuel cell products to market readiness by today, by 2020. And I think we have contributed quite a lot to achieving this target through the 263 projects that we have supported with up to almost €1 billion that leveraged another €1 billion. Projects fall under two main pillars, energy and transport, and cross-cutting being a horizontal pillar. Next slide, please. Starting with the energy pillar, hydrogen production, we only support research and development on renewable hydrogen production, and the electrolyzer, the electrolysis unit, is the main workhorse. You can see in the middle the capacity of the largest electrolyzer development and demonstration projects. I'm very fortunate to be the project officer following these projects. So in the last 8 years, we've gone from projects of 150 kilowatts to the 20 megawatts of the Joules project. It's a 100 times increase. At the same time, we saw a 50 times reduction in the support we provided per kilowatt or per megawatt installed, showing the economies of scale, but also the improvements coming from the industry. I'd like to flag maybe projects, 6 megawatt project H2 Future, 10 megawatt Refine, where advanced electrolyzers were installed and are being demonstrated in the steel industry, in the refineries. These projects very much, I think, influenced EU energy policy, the EU hydrogen strategy, and eventually led to hydrogen being included in the Green Deal and the current 100 megawatt call. Mentioning Joules, I think I very much better understand Joules, having heard of the TSO 2020 project and how it created the environment for Joules to be successful. Next slide, please. A similar picture for solid oxide high temperature electrolyzers. We have now contracts with 2.4 megawatts, which is really impressive. Europe being a leader in electrolysis, low temperature, high temperature. Next slide, please. Moving on to transport, we have supported the development of fuel cells and fuel cell hydrogen vehicles. Top left, you can see private vehicles or fleet vehicles. I'm afraid European OEMs were a bit slow. It's mostly Asian vehicles currently being demonstrated in Europe. Parallel to this, we have been supporting HRSs. You can see a picture of an HRS for a forklift fleet. But the emphasis nowadays is for heavy-duty transport applications, trucks, utility vehicles like garbage collection trucks or common trucks, buses. Europe very strong in this, more than 10 bus OEMs developing hydrogen fuel cell buses. Trains, again, Europe a leader. And recently, maritime applications, hydrogen being used also as a prime mover at the few megawatt scale. And a bit more long-term, it's aviation, either on an electric platform, hydrogen fuel cells, or combusting hydrogen as fuel in jet engines. Next slide, please. Fuel cells, We have also supported the application of fuel cells in stationary applications, like at the left-hand side, homes, small power fuel cells, or in the middle, in buildings or in industrial facilities up to 200 kilowatts. Both small and medium-sized are running on natural gas. But coming to the right, the 1 to 2 megawatt stationary fuel cells, these are PEM running on hydrogen, and this is actually byproduct hydrogen, and our projects are realized in China, in chloralkali plants. Next slide, please. Cross-cutting projects, briefly to mention the topics, it's regulations, codes and standards, education and training, very important, more than 3,000 people are having received education now on these subjects. Safety, key, very key, important topic. Social awareness, public acceptance, sustainability, and recyclability of the different materials, and development databases and monitoring. Next slide, please. Besides projects, we also support studies. This is an example of a most recent study of ours, where we did a study on the opportunities arising from the inclusion of hydrogen in the NECPs. This was a kind of a reality check for us. We talk of hydrogen, but did the NECPs include hydrogen? And would there be additional opportunities? 28 fishes have been developed, one each for the EU 27 plus UK countries. You're welcome to visit our website and check the fish for your country. Summed up, all these 28 give the infographic on the right. You can't quite read it, but it is further summed up at the bottom, where by 2030, all these 28 countries, they foresee an introduction of 13 to 56 gigawatt of electrolyzers being fed by 3 times that capacity in new additional renewables, leading to a CO2 reduction of between 20 to 67 million tons CO2 per annum, creating 100 to 360,000 jobs in the EU. If you visit the website, you will also find the full report covering the whole of Europe and also the fish for your country. Next slide, please. Another important initiative for creating a marketable product that can also do cross-border trading in terms of renewable hydrogen is to establish a guarantees of origin scheme for hydrogen, for green and for low carbon hydrogen. And this we do through the Certify study initially, and currently it's another contract. We're currently at the Certify 3 that aims to set up a platform across Europe. Next slide, please. We already heard about the EU Hydrogen Strategy and the Clean Hydrogen Alliance for Tudor, the 3 phases. Just to mention perhaps the second phase, by 2030, a 40 gigawatt target, which very much relates to the 13 to 56 gigawatts we heard from the previously mentioned study. Next slide. In the future, there will be more opportunities for funding hydrogen. Under Hydrogen Europe, there will be the continuation of the FCH-JU that will be called the Clean Hydrogen Partnership. And there will be, of course, we already heard, CEF2, the Innovation Fund of DG Klima, and DG GROW that is supporting the important projects for common European interest. We already heard about the Green Octopus from the Netherlands. Next and last slide is how the Clean Hydrogen Partnership will look like in the future. There will be 3 main pillars: a pillar on hydrogen production, another one on hydrogen distribution and storage. This is becoming really important. And then the 3rd pillar is on hydrogen end uses, covering hydrogen fuel cells in different transport applications, but also hydrogen burners and hydrogen turbines for power and heat and for industry. And under this third pillar, there will be a lot of collaborations and synergies with other partnerships covering maritime or rail or industry like steel. So it's opening up. Till now, I think it was more like a one-stop shop for hydrogen fuel cells. It was the FCHJU. Now hydrogen is there at the core of the EU energy agenda. So many more partnerships, DGs being involved. We hope that we will still be contributing and possibly be a kind of knowledge hub for all these different partnerships. And with this, the last slide, I would like to thank you for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolaus, for talking us through what we can expect from the Clean Hydrogen Partnership going forward. I propose we take a couple of questions now, and I've got at least one for you, Nicolaus, which comes from Marieke Rijalt, from the, you have to remind me what it's called, the European Hydrogen Association, yeah, can't remember exact title. In any case, Marieke Rijalt. And she wants to confirm if the joint undertaking has to date funded 50% of CAPEX from mobile and stationary equipment, of electrolyzers and so forth, and if that's also going to be the case in the current call for the 100 megawatt electrolyzer.
We have funded up to 100% for the cost of developing electrolyzers in research projects, up to 70% in the development and demonstration of electrolyzers in demonstration projects. And there it depended on whether it's a commercial electrolyzer, so it's just the depreciation that we support, or if it's a novel electrolyzer being developed in the context of our project, where we fund the whole unit. And in the Green Deal call, I understand funding is mentioned to be between 25 and 35 million euro for the 100 megawatt electrolyzer.
Okay, thank you. There is another question which may be best answered by you as well, although if anyone else can answer it, then feel free. It's a question from Frank van Keijenberg. And he basically asks about the possibilities of producing electricity using barges equipped with water turbines on big European streams. So I'm thinking, I think rivers. So basically the idea is, could you have an electrolyzer module and a compressor module on a barge that would effectively produce hydrogen on the barge from a turbine, so from hydroelectric power from the river? Is that something that could be efficient, or is that something you've heard of potentially looking into?
I wouldn't know on this.
Okay. So Frank, I suggest you get in touch with Nicolaus and you can explain to him better than I have what your thinking is, and you can see whether it's something that could potentially be taken up in future in a project. I don't think I have seen other questions coming in that are specifically to any one of the speakers we've had so far. Perhaps it's an opportunity to, well, one follow-up to Andreas, if you're still with us, on 10E and 10T, which will set the framework for how CEF funds, what kind of infrastructure CEF can fund, including through synergy calls in future. Can you remind us of when we expect those two to be amended and therefore have a new framework in place to govern the CEF?
Yes, thank you, my information is that the 10E revision, the NRA revision, is still, the proposal is still to be adopted by the Commission this year. Okay, good. We're doing our best. And for the 10T, for the transport network, the proposal is scheduled for next year. And let's not forget that the transport colleagues will publish the new strategy for sustainable and smart mobility also before Christmas, which again is more a policy document than a regulatory document, but again, it's one element under the Green Deal implementation. Thank you.
Okay, and just to follow up, can you, I suppose, tell us something of, well, I don't want to preempt obviously what changes you expect, but thinking specifically about the synergy call, we've had one project now. Can we expect more of that? And would the new regulatory framework, you imagine, also specifically promote more funding of that nature? So really more integrated projects?
I think all the speakers we heard today were speaking about that we have to get the sectors together. We need transport and energy and maybe even other sectors work together. So clearly we have to do it. That's the policy objective. Then we have to look what is the best way to get into it. And I think to be also honest and fair with you, and maybe the TSO2020 project will confirm, the current setup is not the easiest one to realize it. So I think we need a bit of creativity here. There is a bit of creativity in the self-regulation. So I would suggest, yes, we need synergies. We need a synergy work program and a synergy call, but we have to get it right. So I don't think it's a top priority in 2021 immediately, but we have to work on this. And I don't think I can say more because we're also in a dialogue. I mean, we want to make a call or a work program which fits the needs of the sector. We don't want to do it top down from Brussels. So we are also in a dialogue with the various players. What is the best possible funding support to such projects? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then perhaps we're going to break for coffee in a second. In the absence of more specific questions to anyone, I would maybe end with by going back to Remco and the TSO2020 project. And one thing you said, and you said just in a sentence, but you said one result from the project is that electrolyzers clearly beat batteries. Can you elaborate just briefly on that one finding from the project?
Well, I think maybe Mart can respond to that, because I think this was from the grid research, and it's pretty technical. So maybe Mart, you can elaborate on this.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. It was this slide which you showed you on voltage support. When you have a short circuit, then when we have say many wind farms and solar farms, we have less synchronous machines. So the mass of the connected to the grid is less. So the grid is more, the system is more nervous, so to say. So if there's a short circuit, the frequency suddenly drops. And we did not have a good solution for that. But now with electrolyzers, for example, they react very fast. During the first moment that the frequency drops, already the electrolyzer takes action to correct the frequency. By doing that, you can prevent that the frequency goes that low, below the threshold, and then we have a blackout. And the batteries are doing this also, but the capacity of an electrolyzer is large and can take a longer time to restore.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the explanation.
That's clear. And a final question that came in late, it's the last one we'll take, from David Kool. Does the EU also help or provide assistance in establishing trade routes to countries outside of the EU? This is for the import of hydrogen. I'm guessing that's for Andreas. And from an infrastructure perspective, is that something that CEF might support?
So indeed, it's more about infrastructure than about trade. But of course, in order to trade, you need the infrastructure. So obviously, I can tell you that for the time being, in CEF Energy, we have already, for example, gas pipelines which going beyond the EU, the current EU borders. And again, Europe is not in isolation. I mean, we are an open continent, we are trading, so I think there is a potential, but again, there will not be billions and billions available for this. So you see, I'm a bit cautious there, but in theory, if it makes sense, I will not exclude it, but I would not now invite any consultant to invest a lot of money into developing proposals which are very costly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's clear, and I propose we leave it there. I want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers this morning. Thank you very much for your time, your inputs, your contributions, and for taking the questions both orally and in the chat. We look forward to seeing you again soon, those of you who cannot stay. Those of you who can stay, let's take a few minutes to stretch our legs, go to the restroom, have a cup of coffee, and then we'll reconvene in just a couple of minutes, so shortly before noon, and start the debate. And that will be an opportunity for everyone. So we'll stop using the chat at that point, an opportunity for everyone to intervene verbally and continue the discussion we've started. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you in a few moments.
Sonia, just so we give 10 minutes coffee break, right? So we will be back all at 12:05.
We'll take probably just 5 minutes. So I would say
Just
be
5
back
minutes.
by 12. Yeah,
okay.
We'll kick off at 12.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I don't know if some of you are still on coffee, but I propose we restart. The goal is still to finish, certainly to wrap up within an hour, so to be finished by 1 o'clock. So for this next part, we wanted to take this hour to follow up and talk through some of the issues that we branched this morning. The format is slightly different, so we won't be using the chat anymore for questions. In this case, you have the option of intervening directly, so by effectively raising your hand. So if we can go to the next slide, that's the one. So in theory, everyone can have their cameras on. We're all equal participants now. Keep your microphones switched off unless you have the floor. So I'll hand you the floor at some point if you ask for it. And the way to ask for the floor is to go to the participants tab at the bottom of the screen. And if you click on that, you should see an option to raise your hand that appears. Does everyone see that, or does anyone not see it? I don't think I see it myself at the moment. Close the chat. So yeah, so I see it indeed only, obviously, I don't have the option of raising my hand. I see it indeed when someone has asked for it. So the thing to do is, so you raise your hand, and what I will do then is I will call on you and give you the floor, at which point you need to activate your own microphone. And when you're finished, then obviously deactivate it again. And that's how it will work. So I see a few of you have already raised your hand. So that's great. What we wanted to do to kick off this debate, however, was put a question to all of you first, and that will provide a bit of input. Maybe one thing to add is the slide just briefly flashed up. We will have, Emin will be keeping notes. Well, we have two people taking notes, one more detailed and one here, something more visual. So you should in theory be able to see the notes as they get written. So this is partly to have something concrete to take away and to help us put together some conclusions at the end of this hour. So don't be surprised if you suddenly see writing appearing on this virtual whiteboard. That's the idea. So we wanted to split this hour into two parts. We'll see how much we have time for. The first part is focused on what you see here, legislation, which we've split into policy and the business case. Obviously, those two interrelate, so don't worry too much about that split. Just for your information, the second part then would be focused more on projects and funding. So the TSO2020 project is a starting point there, and talking more specifically about what kind of projects we would think need to be funded by the EU in future, and where those projects, what kind of projects, where they might be. So that's for the second part, indeed. So to kick off this first part, we prepared polling questions for each of them to try and get you thinking a little bit. Let's have the first polling question up. There we go. So this first question is very directly about your policy recommendations to see a greater deployment of green hydrogen. So what do you think is the most urgent issue to be addressed? And you can choose two of these options. So you don't have to limit yourself to one. Obviously, they're all relevant. The idea here is to just get a feel for, if people had to pick two, what for them are really the priorities right now. And you'll see some of the words in there are familiar from what we've already discussed this morning. So notably on demand stimulation, that's, for example, contracts for difference, which we already discussed, the EU ETS, tax exemptions, and a blending mandate in this case would be blending hydrogen with natural gas into the existing gas network. So let's leave it just a moment and see what people think is most important to kickstart the clean hydrogen economy. Okay, so about half of you are going for demand stimulation, but 2/3 have picked cost reduction through technology development. So there is still a lot to do, or maybe we have an audience of engineers. That's possible too. There's still a lot to do and a lot that can be done to make the technology cheaper. I'm conscious that most of the cost of hydrogen relates to the electricity price, if we're talking about green hydrogen, rather than the electrolyzer. So I don't know whether people picking this have included that as well, or whether they think indeed bringing down the cost of the electrolyzer could be or would be a breakthrough development. Okay, let's leave it there. So everything got some answers, but yeah, there's two that clearly stand out. So is there, from this point on, you can indeed request the floor. Is there someone who would like to explain how they voted on this, or if there's something that wasn't there? And I guess the idea now is to try and pinpoint what you believe is most urgent from a policy perspective to ultimately make that business case. I'll just have a look if people have their hands raised. I don't see one so far. Let's see. Nienke Homan, I think I saw your hand. Would you, so Nienke Homan, and perhaps it's useful if rather than me introducing the few people I might know or might not know, if everyone just very briefly, when you take the floor, just tell us who you are.
Yes, thank you. My name is Nienke Homan. I'm a regional minister in Groningen. It's in the north of the Netherlands. And what we see now, for our industrial clusters in the Netherlands, we make plans to make the transition to sustainable energy or hydrogen. And what we now see that are where the industry worries the most of is that they see that sometimes infrastructure is stopping their ambitions because they need otherwise sustainable energy. That's not enough in their region, or they need hydrogen, green hydrogen. So infrastructure will lead the way. And if we miss the infrastructure for, well, especially some large clusters that are not on the shore side, then, well, that will stop the growth of the sustainable industries. So infrastructure will lead the way. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I've just seen a message from Jutta Paulus saying she's going to have to leave us in the next 10 minutes. She's on the IMO, so International Maritime Organization delegation, and needs to follow their meeting. So if anyone has something specific to address to her, this is perhaps the moment to do so. I know two people have their hands raised. Is there anyone who has something specific for Jutta? If so, activate your microphone now and say it, because I don't see a hand. I don't think so. So Jutta, feel free to stay with us for as long as you can. And thank you once again for your contribution this morning.
Yes, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for this very interesting event. And I truly hope that we will receive the slides if this is possible, because it would be just very nice to have it as a well, sort of point of information and come back to it when I have specific questions. It's much easier having this reminder, so I would be very grateful. And thanks a lot for having me, and a good discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, the slides and the recording of today's event should be sent to you, so you'll have both of those at your disposal. So perfect. Thank you once again. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Then I'd like to hand over to Dirk Schaap, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, it doesn't make life easier, but I believe the focus shouldn't be on one of the elements, but the trick is combining them. And as Nienke Homan said, infra should lead the way, but infra only makes sense if you have the end users. The end users accomplish that in the end the prices of technology can drop because of the scale that you build up. So I believe the real way forward is, in a smart way, combine all these things, including legislation, standardization, and these issues. I realize it's making things difficult, but the trick is, how do we do this in a smart and cost-efficient way, I believe.
Maybe a follow-up. Do you think policymakers are adequately getting to grips on all these fronts? So we need to do everything, but are we behind anywhere or in advance anywhere?
No, I don't think. Don't think so. The problem is that there's a strong demand to make choices. Whether we need gray, blue, or green hydrogen, is gray acceptable? Is certification possible, acceptable? How do we organize it? We are on top of all these issues, and I believe that's very important, and not in this phase make too many choices, because that may lead you to a dead end.
Yeah.
So I believe policymakers and the European Commission with the different programs are on the right track.
Okay, great. Then James Watson, so Secretary General of Eurogas.
Thanks, Sonia, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. I think on the policy front, I think it's been a very interesting discussion today, hearing all the different activities that are being undertaken to deliver hydrogen. But from a Eurogas perspective, we think the most important thing is to ramp up deployment as soon as possible. We looked at the recent UK announcements, and they have ideas such as hydrogen villages and hydrogen towns to run their heating systems from hydrogen in the not too distant future, i.e. in this decade. And we think that these are the sort of things that we need to be doing. We need to focus on deployment, investing in deployment. We think the best way to drive deployment is to use policy instruments under the new Fit for 55 regime that we expect the European Commission to bring forward next year, which involve targets. And what we mean by targets, it's things like the overall reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from gaseous fuels. We think a 20% target should be set with a baseline of 2018, so that by 2030, the gaseous fuel we use is 20% less greenhouse gas intensive. The reason we think that that's a good idea is we believe that that means that people invest in the right types of technologies that we need in the gas sector to achieve lower carbon emissions and ultimately carbon neutrality in 2050. So we see targets as a very good mechanism to encourage investor behavior, but also member state behavior. This would be an EU binding target. We also believe that that can be underpinned by an 11% of end gas consumption coming from renewable sources by 2030, which would also make sure that we uptake renewable fuels as well. Targets wouldn't be the only measure, though, of course. We do believe guarantees of origin, certificates, been mentioned today as well, are important. This would also allow investors to be able to demonstrate that they are investing in the right technologies, and for consumers to be able to be sure that what they're buying is indeed renewable or low carbon. And then finally, we'd see the CO2 price. We need the CO2 price to improve, to increase, to go north, because I think if you put those three things together, a higher CO2 price going up beyond 30 towards 50, targets in place for decarbonisation of gas and the uptake of renewable gases and guarantees of origin, you would have a very robust policy framework for people to make sure they invest in the right types of gas, whether that's biomethane or hydrogen. For today, we say hydrogen. That's a great way to get people to respond and do it. And it's not, a flight of fancy. Member states are doing this already. The French have a 10% renewable gas target by 2030. We've seen countries like Austria following suit, but with a terawatt hour target. And then you look at the hydrogen strategies of Germany, the UK, Portugal, and you will see that they are setting targets for the amount of gigawatts of electrolyzers they want to be deployed. So targets seems to be a way that people are taking this forward in the member states. Why we think it should be done at the EU level is because if we have one big success in the energy market today, it's the internal gas market, because molecules flow relatively easily. Of course, there are tariffs across borders, but they're relatively low. And that means that we don't want to lose that. And if you have hydrogen developing in certain parts of Europe and biomethane in others, natural gas still being used in others, you risk a fragmentation. So there's an argument for an EU-wide concerted effort to make sure that we are still able to bring consumers the lowest cost gaseous molecules for both energy-intensive industries and households. I'll finish this by saying Eurogas is also representative of the distribution system. And one of the things that we think is very interesting is that there is a lot of talk about hydrogen backbones, which we are fully supportive of, but we shouldn't overlook the short-term benefits that we have, that most electrolyzers today are being connected to the distribution system. And that's because distribution systems are feeding technology, boilers, and low temperature heating, which can handle blends of hydrogen today. So in fact, electrolyzers are currently today going into the distribution grid, and I think will be the case for a number of years to come. This means that we'll actually be able to reduce the carbon footprint and the greenhouse gas footprint of gaseous fuels consumed in homes relatively quickly if we maintain that process. So from our point of view—
Can I ask you to wrap up? Sorry,
yeah,
James.
from our point of view, we think that that's a good way to go, and the distribution system should definitely be a fundamental focus of all policy. Thanks, Sonia.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear on your targets proposal, so that's both an end-use target for renewable gas of 11%, for example, and the 20% is to reduce the carbon footprint of gas.
Greenhouse gas.
Greenhouse gas, yeah, and that's across sectors. So that's general economy-wide target. Yes. So a bit like we had the Renewable Energy Directive for electricity originally, and the Fuel Quality Directive. Yeah, okay. We're trying to reduce the carbon footprint of fuels. Okay.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enrique Troncoso, please introduce yourself briefly.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the invitation to participate today. So I'm Enrique Troncoso, Director of Energy. We are an SME. We're quite involved in the development and design, and also the delivery of some of the large hydrogen deployment projects going on in Europe. And we've been doing this for a while, including some projects in the Netherlands. For example, the Hydrogen Valley Haven project, where we supported the design and now the delivery. So I would like to offer my perspective from an operational point of view. We've been delivering these projects for a while. We've seen the progression of the sector, and would like to go back to the comments from Nienke. I fully agree with that. From our perspective, the demand push is already there and it's growing. And what we see a gap at the moment is an infrastructure and green hydrogen supply. So if the trend continues as it is, we will probably find a bottleneck soon where we will not have enough supply capacity. For those of you who've been in the sector for a while, you will recognize that 2, 3, 4 years ago, what we had is a technology push, whereas now is a demand pull. So we need to be mindful of that, and I think we need to put effort and the policy incentives and regulations in place to develop infrastructure and supply capacity. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sonia.
Thank you. Just one follow-up to you. You say the demand is already there, but we also frequently hear blue and especially green, so renewable hydrogen is hugely more expensive than gray hydrogen. So where does the demand come from? It doesn't sound like it's a cost-competitive solution yet, certainly for, I would say, very price-sensitive, energy-intensive industries, but also, also in other economic sectors.
Okay, so for example, mobility is probably one of the sectors that will offer the best cost routes for green hydrogen at the moment, particularly if you can tie it up to fleets, buses, light duty and heavy duty transport. And I think going back to one comment, I think it was Dirk, the best way to, from our experience, some people might agree or disagree, but I'm just offering my views, is to tie it up. So it's to develop local or regional hydrogen hubs where you already have your demand tied up, and there might be an incentive either on mobility, on industry, for example, in that location in particular, to decarbonize, and they might have the policy and the financial incentive to do so. So there are instances and locations where you can justify the cost of green hydrogen, but of course we need subsidies still.
Okay, yeah, Okay, thank you. Els de Wit.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I would just like to concur with what was said. My name is Els de Wit, for those of you who do not know me. I'm a colleague of Dirk Schaap, originally one of the leads for TSO2020, but now in a different position within the ministry, but very happy to be here this morning. I think that it's very true what you say, what the previous speaker said. Currently, I'm interim manager for a new strategy in hydrogen and mobility, and we see that there's a huge demand in the Netherlands in the transport chains and logistic chain for green hydrogen. And I think what's good for people to realize is that in the mobility sector, I think we have what we call in Dutch a little bit an absorption mechanism. So there's a high price that people pay for the fuel at the moment in relation to other sectors. So the price absorbability, I don't know whether that's the correct English word to use, is high. So it does make sense for a business case perspective that green hydrogen can also be contributed to the transport sector. And once again, I think what we've seen for the past few months in which we've done the strategy, that there currently is a high demand for green hydrogen in the transport sector.
Mm-hmm. And
thank you.
Just to follow up, transport, what kind of transport are you talking about here? I mean, everything, aviation, maritime, road transport, trucks, cars?
Yeah, for the new strategy in the Netherlands, we talk about the transport system as a whole. So we look at passenger cars, buses, heavy duty. And I think what Jutta said earlier, what we see currently is that there are new markets developing in the Netherlands very rapidly. We've started with buses a long time ago, but we see now more focus coming, more markets in heavy duty segment. For long haul, but especially also maritime applications in harbors. And that's where those ecosystems are now growing also in the Netherlands or had taken place. And I think that the value of TSO for us is very high because we now understand more also the interconnecting need that we have with the energy system. And also for aviation. You know that our aviation sector is very heavily involved in the production also in the Netherlands for synthetic fuels. There's going to be a big plant. So we also have aviation on the radar as a segment in the strategy hydrogen for mobility. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Tjisse Stelpstra.
Yes, thank you. I'm Tjisse Stelpstra. I'm the regional minister of the province of Drenthe, also in the northern Netherlands, colleague of Nienke. I agree fully with what Dirk Schaap said, and I want to underline that it's always a chicken and egg discussion, and we should not make the choice between the chicken or the egg, but we take them both, the chicken and the egg. So we have to stimulate the demand side, and we have to also stimulate the production side. And as a regional government, we are doing both. We put our efforts also in the production side. I'm just now in the city of Emmen, where we are making a big hydrogen factory, electrolyzing, and also, but we stimulated also on buses, hydrogen buses, and we stimulated also on the side of industry. And in this transition period, we need also stimulate and I think that's also that Europe should do it is on both the capex and the opex, and opex of course for the short side, but we have to do it to get the price down. That's very very important. So let's have a big discussion on if it's gray, it's blue. At the end, it will be green. At the end, it will be green. But we need now to make mass and put up the production. So short, let's do all.
Okay, thank you. Remco Wassink.
Yes, I wanted to give some examples from our reality at Hystock that we see at the moment. We have about 50% of our capacity sold, but if we look at the contracts, then next year we will be sold out. So the demand is rising. And this is a clear example from practice. And as already stated, most of the hydrogen is going to mobility, but it's also going to test facilities for suburbs and also to local industry. So we see a large rise in demand.
Okay, thank you. We have another polling question, which I'll introduce now, because I don't see a hand raised immediately, which is basically asking you, if we can get it up. Let's not forget the overall context. We're in an economic crisis, and everything that's happened so far, I mean, happened prior to this. So just to get a feel on whether people think we are continuing as we did before, we're at risk of slowing down, we may see an opportunity to accelerate the deployment of hydrogen, or we'll see a radical rethink of what place hydrogen could have in the energy mix in Europe. It's just for some additional input. Okay, most of you are optimistic and think indeed that things like the European Green Deal, we have now a window of opportunity to accelerate investments in hydrogen deployment. And I guess that the policymakers are actively exploring those. Okay, I think the numbers have more or less stabilized. So I guess we've talked a fair bit about policy. The business case, obviously, for hydrogen also stems, at least in part, from policy. A lot of emphasis on the importance of getting the infrastructure right, and that demand is there. On the production side, we will need these, well, electrolyzers that are obviously on much larger scale than we have today, renewable energy production on much larger scale than we have today. If the question is what would clinch a final investment decision on a 100 megawatt electrolyzer, for example, what would people say? Is there anyone who has a view on that? Or what's missing as an ingredient to that decision? If we're saying demand is rising, okay, the infrastructure, many of you have pointed to and said the infrastructure is perhaps the stumbling block. Nonetheless, I guess from my perspective, what you hear most frequently at I was going to say conferences, obviously we don't go to conferences in the same sense anymore, but what people seem to say is we're on the cusp of something that could be a huge change in the energy system, but those big investment decisions have yet to be made. So they may be made, they're in the planning, but we're not quite there yet. And whilst we're talking about transport, I would say here in Brussels, we often hear, there's a lot of talk about industry too, where obviously I guess the volumes the margins are not there. The margins are in transport, but the volumes are in industry. So that's perhaps not an easy circle to square when it comes to making the business case. Is there anyone who wants to input on that? If not, I propose then that we move on and we talk specifically, the other half of this equation about projects and funding, because ultimately, of course, the role of projects like TSO2020 and what it achieved what it has achieved is to accelerate the deployment that many of us or many of you would like to see. So let's do another poll question, which is focused more specifically on projects and funding. So we heard from Andreas Boschen, and his colleagues are still with us in this debate as well, what we can expect from the new Connecting Europe facility going forward, assuming it gets signed off, and that there is interest in synergy projects going forward as well. So this is a question, what type of projects should new synergy funds target? And I see, again, not everyone has access to the pop-up. You may have a pop-up blocker installed if that's the case. So you may need to enable pop-ups to be able to see the poll. So this question is really trying to gauge, I think, well, in part, at what stage of development is the hydrogen technology, and therefore what kind of support could the CEF most usefully provide. And most of you are saying deployment. We're ready to deploy. It's now a question of getting it out there. I'm aware, obviously, the EU has other funds that are perhaps focused on more on the research side. And we heard from Nicolaus as well, what kind of activities the Clean Hydrogen Partnership will undertake in future. So more upstream. Does anyone want to comment here on what they would like to see funded in future and why? Any of our speakers from this morning who want to come back now that we have these results? Yes.
I would like to say something about that, if I may, Sonia.
Yeah, go ahead. And afterwards, we'll go to Marike. Yeah, go ahead, René.
Okay. I think deployment is key at this moment in time. We have, and that's similar to the discussion we just had about the chicken and egg story. A lot of discussion who should start first and how to accomplish to make the steps together. The only way to do that is by doing it, actually. So making projects, defining the ecosystem. They don't need to be let's say Europe-wide for starters, but like for instance projects in Netherlands, Heaven, where all kinds of projects are tied together to build the ecosystem. I think these kinds of investments are needed, not anymore on the pilot scale, but just on the deployment scale. The deployment scale now is not at gigawatt level because we're not there yet, but deployment scale can be the tens of megawatt level, where we actually need to take step by step the scaling up that we need to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. Marike Rijalt from the European Hydrogen Association. We can't hear you, so you may need to unmute yourself. I still can't hear you. Can you hear us, Marike?
Sorry,
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, now we hear you.
Yeah. Switching back and forth. Yeah, I want to reiterate a bit the concept of TSO2020 within the so-called synergy call that was issued in 2016, because I think this combination of pilots and deployment, that was always the feature of this CEF specific topic, I think would still be quite valid for future projects as well in CEF. I think most of you know that we don't have this mobile equipment, meaning the cars, the buses, the trucks, the ships included in the funding of CEF. This means that this area of indeed development is not covered by EU funding. The Horizon 2020 and also Horizon Europe are research programs that will not fund the quantities of applications that we would need to indeed offer some insight and impact. So I want indeed to stress again in developing the European Hydrogen Association, as you know, as a network of national experts working on different projects in Europe. Yeah, we see that in the development of these projects, we still are looking and have to go after the right text and funding programs to make this happen. So I would like to call indeed for some continuation of this synergy, meaning indeed the technical combination of energy network coupling to not only within energy systems, gas and electricity networks, but also to transport, and then include the fleet part in this in the future. So also in CEF2 and in Horizon Europe, we would definitely need, as these are the only programs right now, be able to fund these topics, to include larger numbers of applications, possibilities for a while.
Okay. Okay. So your point is, so far things like ships and trucks are not are not covered. There's no EU funding available for that part, that potential part of the value chain. And in future, to maximize deployment, we would want to maximize support for a variety of applications, including also that part. Okay. We have a question from Frank van Keijenberg. Do you want to take the floor briefly to put it?
Yes, thanks. Good morning, everybody. So I am in charge of elaborating the hydrogen strategy for the Walloon region of Belgium. And in this field, one question is, what about the efficiency of electrolyzer regarding their capacity? Also about the good use of rare resources like platinum in the electrolyzers. Is it better to in the best practice to promote a big size electrolyzer, or any size of an electrolyzer can be used in the aim to produce hydrogen whenever it can be, even if in quick impact projects rather than big projects on the long term? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anyone who wants to attempt answering that, who has a view on that? What kind of electrolyzers, what efficiency, what size would be best, could provide best value for money if we're looking to support them? Better to go for smaller, faster projects, or really invest big upfront?
Maybe I can try to make a comment. This is
Go ahead, Nicolas.
Well, electrolyzers have an efficiency ranging from 60 to 70%. Alkaline electrolyzers tend to be more efficient. PEM electrolyzers tend to be operating more dynamically. So one could also benefit from the provision of electricity grid balancing services. In terms of what capacity to install, well, if one is to aim to produce renewable hydrogen, one should aim to have the electrolyzer operating at full capacity 40% of the year. This is roughly the ballpark figure in various studies in case one wants to have a viable business case. So there is no simple rule going small with many electrolyzers or big with few. The aim should be, first of all, to have the demand to cover and to aim to have it operating 40% of the year in full capacity.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's a good answer to a difficult question. Thank you. Let's go to thank you. We have a final polling question, which tackles the final point of geographical spread. As we saw at the very start, many of us are based in Northwestern Europe. And one of the questions is, how do we, or can the hydrogen story be broader than that? Can it be a truly European project? So the question here is, as part of that, should synergy projects be limited to the 10E and 10T core corridors, or should a substantial amount of the money also be made available to the comprehensive network? So what that means for those of you who are not in the au fait with the technicalities of all these terms is basically should the comprehensive network would cover all European regions, whereas the core corridors would mean that the funds are not available to certain parts of Europe. And I guess there's an additional dimension of, do we imagine hydrogen primarily as a large scale centralized operation, or how far down can it go, and to what extent do we also want to invest at the distribution level, as James talked about earlier? But primarily here, it's about geographical spread within Europe. Do we stick to the core corridors and the countries that those are in, or do we really try and extend it as far as possible throughout Europe, including into Eastern Europe, for example, Southern Europe? So most of you are saying yes, so we should extend it. The fund should not be limited simply to the core corridors. We need to think about the bigger picture and make this funding available across all European regions. Again, is there someone who would like to comment on this? Perhaps a broader comment too on whether you feel this is primarily a Northwestern European project so far, and well, does that matter, particularly at this stage? Is it feasible for this to become, to be rolled out to other parts of Europe? Ports, for example, are often linked. I think also the IEA talked about ports as nerve centers for a potential hydrogen economy. Of course, Southern Europe, I mean, there are ports there as well. So if it's, if it works in Rotterdam or Antwerp, why not? Could it work at a port in Greece, for example? Could it be interesting elsewhere? Is there anyone who wants to comment or ask a question or put forward an idea on how you see, I guess, the hydrogen economy beyond its basis in Northwestern Europe, or why you think it has the momentum it has here?
Can I respond to that, Sonja?
Yeah, you may, yeah.
As we are growing from, let's say, funding the RD&I projects to pilot projects to more deployment projects, the investment involved is much larger than it was. So if we actually want to make steps, we should make a focus step and make sure that everybody can learn from that and pick up from that. So everybody benefits in the end from the funds that are made available, but it doesn't make sense to distribute the funds around the globe, if you like, or throughout Europe, because no project can be made on a very profitable basis at this moment in time. So we rather make sure that we learn as fast as possible and as much as possible from the money we spend, so we can develop altogether the profitable business cases leading to a decarbonized environment.
Okay, so you would say it makes more sense to focus the money for now on where things look most promising, get deployment, get things up and running, and then afterwards we can see whether and how that can be replicated elsewhere. So to focus for now.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Nienke.
Yeah, thank you. And what made our heaven, our hydrogen ecosystem here in the Northern Netherlands a success is that we have the whole value chain together. And I think the idea of the hydrogen valleys is to indeed make a blueprint that you can copy everywhere and then connect it. So we have to have a good blueprint and copy it everywhere, and then make a plan for the infrastructure to make it bloom in the other regions. So I think we have to invest in the different infrastructure in the different regions, but we have to build it up. Make a copy next to into the next hydrogen valley, and then to the other hydrogen valley. So we really need a plan for that.
Okay, so a lot of learning opportunities, or opportunity to connect up these different hydrogen valleys, bottom up effectively. Yeah, for them to learn from one another. Okay. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who wants to intervene at this point? Because I'm conscious we're approaching 1 o'clock. So if not, then I will close the discussion, I think. Is there anyone else who wants to come back on, well, either points made this morning or what we've discussed just now? I don't think so. And I don't think anyone has responded in the chat. So else, okay, we'll make that our final intervention.
So sorry, thank you very much for to be able to come in. I think what is so very important, what we see in the Netherlands, that we're fairly small as a country. We talked about ecosystems, and we are now looking also from the ministry side to work more together with related partners on the big 10T corridors. I think it's crucial that on corridors such as Rhine-Alpine and North Sea Baltic, that we make traction together and that we combine industry partners from transport side and from energy, had to make sure that what was discussed earlier by INEA, that we have an opportunity to build a pipeline of projects for the future synergy calls. So that's what we're currently looking at from the ministry side, also from the International Affairs Division, to accommodate such a shift towards working more together on those corridors, also with neighboring countries. So I think that is also important to take on board on a geographical spread, because then you make the scale, then you make the mass together, and then applications can come earlier to market in maritime port areas, but also for heavy duty applications. We need to have more mass, more scale, and working together on the corridors can allow us to make that scale together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everyone for your contributions. We wanted to have a short wrap up. We were going to have a coffee break, but I'm conscious that we're at 10 to 1. Emin, you've been taking notes. Shall we do the conclusions right away? I'm happy to talk through briefly what I take away, and we will obviously have something in, you have something in writing, which is more, more elaborate. So I propose we do it right away. I fear otherwise we're going to lose people because everyone's probably desperate for lunch by now. So once again, thank you. Sorry?
If you feel ready, yes. Otherwise,
yes, I say let's do that. So yeah, thank you everyone for your participation this morning, all the way through to lunch. I think so to try and wrap up the debate we just had. Infrastructure, the #1 priority for most of you. I recognize that may be a reflection of the organizations you represent. So obviously that has to be taken into account. Nonetheless, several of you saying you do see demand, so a demand pull, as Enrique put it, and that I think is encouraging. Transport stood out, mobility. Again, maybe in part a reflection of what we're talking about here. The synergy call is obviously about integrating energy and transport. But transport, several of you pointed out, probably offers one of the best routes for hydrogen take-up going forward. There's a discussion then over what kind of transport. I think heavy duty, we've talked about aviation, maritime. Those are likely promising areas, perhaps more so than passenger cars, at least in the early days. And I see, Emin, you've just highlighted indeed demand should push development forwards, or well, pull development out. and also be a stimulus, obviously, for production going forward. I think it was Chisse who said we shouldn't worry, and it came out, I think, throughout the discussion, we shouldn't worry too much about different colors of hydrogen at the moment. It will all be green at the end. Everyone is aiming for the same end goal. So we all agree on that, and then we can bicker about how much other hydrogen we need en route. But I think there's also general recognition that there will probably have to be something else before we get to fully renewable hydrogen. An interesting contribution from James Watson, and I think that was more on the demand side, on how to create demand. So he talked about 2 targets. So mirroring effectively what the EU did for renewable electricity. So on the one hand, a volume-based target, an end-use target, blending in renewable hydrogen. On the other hand, a target for reducing the carbon footprint of all gas, which equates really to what the Fuel Quality Directive tried to do for fuels. And he mentioned also guarantees of origin as an important way to build access and demand. We heard about the importance of having funding for as many applications and the entire value chain as possible. So in this case, ships and trucks, Marijke pointed out, these are not currently covered by CEF, and perhaps are not intended to be priority targets going forward either. The CEF will look to fund other synergy projects in future. I think that's clear. In terms of the last subject we touched on, geographical spread, most of you said yes, funding should be made available to all regions in Europe, although we also heard it would make sense to focus the funding for the moment, to make sure that we get some projects, some commercial applications up and running, and several people pointed out that key is also that we're funding things where there is an ecosystem to really be able to deliver a hydrogen economy, hydrogen valleys, and Nienke said these can also learn from one another. So I think useful lessons there, and deployment, as René said, deployment is really what it's all about at the moment. So if we're talking about funding anything with CEF, it really needs to be focused on deployment. The question is now, can we make it happen? And if I link that back a little bit to what we talked about this morning, I think it was clear that TSO2020 was a flagship project that has unlocked a lot and got us en route towards the beginnings of a hydrogen economy here in Northwestern Europe and in the Netherlands, and something that could be replicated elsewhere going forward. I guess the other interesting, there are a lot of questions to resolve, and Jutta Paulus had an interesting intervention, really pinpointing some of these unresolved questions. On the one hand, we heard James Watson later, for example, talking about the importance of the distribution system and also blending hydrogen in there. Whereas her point at the start was, I think she said, we need to make sure we're not wasting hydrogen on heating in buildings and in, for example, prolonging the life of the internal combustion engine. So I think there's still discussion to be had. We started off talking about transport, over exactly how and where in transport hydrogen has a role, a cost-effective role in taking the energy transition forward. Jutta also emphasized the challenge on the production side. Huge amount of renewable energy will be required if we want to have fully renewable hydrogen. We need, she said, 8 to 10 times the energy is required well-to-wheel versus direct electrification. So that's 8 to 10 times the amount of wind and solar power. And I recall that as of next year, we have an EU target for renewables, but no more national targets. So nobody is really under any obligation to build any new renewables. So it remains to be seen whether and to what extent those renewables will materialize. She also emphasized the importance of the domestic market. We're not going to be leaders on innovation and maintain the current leadership Europe has on electrolyzers if there is no domestic market. So whilst everyone always says imports are very definitely a part of the hydrogen story, and international collaboration. There will need to be a domestic market if Europe is to maintain its industrial leadership in this new field. And I think I shall leave it there. We had a good overview from the Commission on its hydrogen policy, the CEF. I think we heard from Remco and Mart on what TSO 2020 has achieved and the value of electrolyzers for the energy system, also vis-a-vis batteries. We heard from René also on what's happening, again, the different kinds of networks that we can envisage, and again, what role hydrogen can play in the energy system. And for Nicolaus, the kinds of, more on the research side, how the Clean Hydrogen Partnership will help take all this forward. One comment I promised to add was Kobe van der Linde, who had to leave earlier, said in one of the earlier polls, one of the first polls where we asked how close are we to full hydrogen deployment, she said, well, that also depends on where you are. And of course, for some people, some parts of Europe, we are perhaps much closer than other parts of Europe. But the end goal will be, if this is to work, for this to be a truly European initiative. And I think projects like TSO 2020 stand us in good stead to have at least started down this path. That's it from me. And a thank you to the organizers of today, to all the speakers, the TSO 2020 Consortium. And we hope to continue this conversation in the weeks, months, and years ahead. So thank you very much.